When people fake confidence, it is rarely because they feel powerful inside. More often, it is because they feel exposed. What looks like certainty is usually a psychological shield, an armor built to guard against rejection, shame, or the fear of not being enough. The mind learns quickly that appearing confident earns approval, while vulnerability invites judgment. So a performance begins. The voice becomes firmer, the posture straighter, the opinions louder. Yet beneath that surface, the inner world remains tense, constantly scanning for threats. Carl Jung would have called this a carefully constructed persona, a mask designed not to express the self, but to protect it. The problem is that the mask demands energy. It must be maintained, defended, and reinforced. This is why those who fake confidence often feel exhausted, irritable, or strangely empty after social interactions. They are not being seen, they are being believed, and belief is not the same as connection. True strength does not need constant display. It does not rush to prove itself or silence doubt with volume. When confidence is real, it is quiet, grounded, and flexible. When it is fake, it is rigid and fearful. The question worth asking is not how confident do I appear, but what am I afraid others might see if I stop pretending? There is a quiet fear beneath fake confidence that rarely gets acknowledged, the fear of exposure. It is the anxiety that, at any moment, someone might look a little closer and see what the performance is trying to hide. This fear does not disappear once the mask is in place. It intensifies. The individual becomes hyper, aware of how they are perceived, carefully managing words, reactions, and even silence. Confidence turns into a role that must be played flawlessly, because any crack feels dangerous. From a Jungian lens, this is the tension between the persona and the true self. The persona promises safety through approval, but it also traps the individual in constant self-monitoring. This is why fake confidence often comes with defensiveness, impatience, or the need to dominate conversations. It is not arrogance, it is anxiety trying to stay in control. The fear is not failure itself, but the humiliation of being seen as inadequate. Ironically, the more one fears exposure, the more disconnected one becomes. Authenticity invites understanding, performance invites scrutiny. And scrutiny only sharpens the fear. Real confidence grows when a person allows themselves to be seen as unfinished, imperfect, and human. The moment you stop protecting an image is the moment you begin protecting your peace. When confidence is fragile, it rarely stays quiet. It seeks reassurance through excess more words, more control, more certainty than the moment requires. This is where overcompensation appears. The individual may boast, interrupt, correct others unnecessarily, or assert dominance in subtle ways. On the surface, this looks like strength. Psychologically, it is an attempt to drown out an inner voice that questions one's worth. Jung understood that what we exaggerate outwardly often points to what we lack inwardly. Overcompensation is not deception, it is self-protection. The psyche senses vulnerability and responds by amplifying its opposite, but amplification is unstable. It creates a rigid identity that cannot tolerate disagreement, ambiguity, or challenge. Any threat to the inflated self-image feels personal, which is why defensiveness becomes so common. The tragedy is that this behavior distances the very connection it seeks. People feel talked over rather than understood, impressed rather than trusted. Confidence that demands attention rarely earns respect. True confidence allows space for others to speak, for uncertainty to exist, for growth to happen. If you notice the urge to prove yourself, pause and listen to what that urge is guarding. Strength does not need to announce itself. It reveals itself through restraint. To understand why someone fakes confidence, we often have to look backward, not forward. These patterns rarely begin in adulthood. They are learned early, shaped by environments where acceptance was conditional. A child who is praised only for achievement, strength, or obedience learns a quiet lesson. Who you are is not enough, but what you show might be. Vulnerability becomes risky, and authenticity feels unsafe. From a Jungian perspective, the psyche adapts in order to survive. The developing self constructs a persona that fits what the world seems to reward. If emotional needs were dismissed or weakness was met with criticism, confidence becomes something to perform rather than feel. Over time, the performance hardens into identity. The individual no longer remembers choosing the mask. It simply feels necessary. This is why fake confidence often feels automatic and exhausting. It is not arrogance, it is conditioning. The nervous system learned that visibility without armor leads to pain. Yet what once protected the child can imprison the adult. Growth requires recognizing that the environment has changed, even if the inner rules have not. You do not heal by perfecting the mask. You heal by questioning why you needed it in the first place. Awareness is the first act of freedom. At the core of fake confidence lies what Carl Jung called the shadow, the parts of ourselves we have learned to reject, deny, or hide. Insecurity does not disappear when it is ignored. It retreats into the unconscious, where it quietly influences behavior. The confident persona stands in the light, polished and controlled, while the shadow carries doubt, fear, and unmet emotional needs. The more rigid the persona becomes, the darker and more powerful the shadow grows. This inner split creates tension. A person may appear composed, while feeling internally divided, constantly managing what must not be revealed. Jung warned that what remains unconscious does not stay harmless. It finds expression indirectly, through anxiety, irritability, or self-sabotage. Fake confidence is not the absence of insecurity. It is insecurity pushed out of sight. Integration, not elimination, is the psychological task here. The shadow is not an enemy. It is a messenger. When its contents are acknowledged, confidence no longer needs to be manufactured. It begins to emerge naturally, rooted in self, understanding rather than self-denial. This is why real confidence feels calm instead of strained. It comes from wholeness. The work is not to become flawless, but to become honest. When you stop fighting your shadow, you stop needing a mask to feel strong. True confidence is not something you construct. It is something that develops when the inner world is no longer at war with itself. When a person stops measuring their worth through constant comparison or external validation, a quiet stability begins to form. This kind of confidence does not rely on being impressive, dominant, or flawless. It rests on self-acceptance, the willingness to acknowledge limitations without collapsing under them. Jung believed that psychological maturity comes from integration, not perfection. When fear, doubt, and insecurity are allowed into awareness, they lose their power to control behavior from the shadows. The individual no longer needs to pretend, because nothing essential is being hidden. This is why authentic confidence feels grounded and spacious. It leaves room for uncertainty, learning, and change. What many mistake for confidence is certainty. But certainty is often brittle. Real confidence is flexible. It can admit ignorance, tolerate discomfort, and remain intact in the face of criticism. It does not seek applause. It seeks alignment. When you stop trying to prove your value, you begin to experience it. And in that shift, from performance to presence, you don't just appear confident to others, You finally feel at home within yourself.